I'm Jim Rimbach, president of CX Global Media and host of the Customer Service Weekly podcast powered by PACE, the official podcast of National Customer Service Week, where our purpose is to help you ignite CX celebration all year. Each episode, I meet with senior leaders from top brands as they share their story on how they recognize and lead the people and solutions that help their organizations to deliver a customer experience that separates their organization from others, so you can ignite your own CX celebration. And now, on to the show. Okay, CX Igniters, today I'm excited because I have somebody who I've known for many years and who's just, I think is just an incredible human being. And that's Tabitha Dunn, who actually now has a triple role. She is the Chief Customer Officer and Head of Customer Experience and Global Sales Excellence at Ericsson. And her background is, extensive, has multiple perspectives. She's going to share a lot with us on the Customer Service Weekly podcast, which is powered by PACE. Tabitha, welcome.
Oh, thanks for having me. I always enjoy the chance to connect with you and hear about how your passion is igniting passion in others.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And I think, you and I had this off mic discussion about this whole passion piece and how there's really a core nucleus of people who have been carrying this for a couple decades now. Oh, I guess, I'll date myself at least. But, if you could share a little bit about your background, and kind of how you've evolved from, the sales and customer service into where you are now, and, what you're doing there at Ericsson.
Sure, happy to. So I was incredibly lucky 20 years ago to get a job in Xerox, and it was in their customer support organization for the printer division. And I had 3 jobs, and those teams were really great. And I remember going, okay, well, major account management for services, that's great. I'm totally comfortable with that team. Customer advocacy, so they used to call it the CAT team, which was really the team that went out and handled customer issues that were super hot. They'd gone all the way through the escalation path, or an executive got that escalation. Like, okay, we're good. But then they gave me this thing they called customer satisfaction. I'm like, what am I doing with that? We're running surveys? And they were like, yeah, this is like part of our core measurement for the business. And don't worry, you've got people in that team, you're going to be good. And the 5 years I was there, it was an incredible time for Xerox. Really, it was one of those things that they wrote a Harvard business study about the turnaround of Xerox. And so much of it was customer centric. And I fell in love with the customer satisfaction part of my job, and really listening to customers, understanding what they needed, helping drive the right improvements in the business, and measuring our progress. And I was in the Lean Six Sigma Black Belt program there when I decided, I really like this customer experience thing, and I think I'm going to do more of that. And I left to go build the customer experience practice at Philips. And that's where I got the bug. So this is now here at Ericsson, my 5th time building a customer experience practice from the ground up. And I love that, this role, not only do I lead the end-to-end customer experience and our strategy for that, but I also have responsibility for the employee experience for all of our people around the world who are in sales and commercial management roles. So they reported to many different people, but we take care of what is their global experience, their career development, how do we help them learn and grow? And then I also have sales excellence, which is really where we drive that, global strategy around what do we want from a wanted position, as well as our tools, our change management, and our best practices there. And I love that ability to manage not just the customer's needs, but the employee's needs at every touch point across the journey.
So for me, when you start talking about, Harvard case studies, and you start looking at the longitudinal studies that have been associated with customer experience and employee experience and that connection, I mean, for me, you're living it. And I think so many organizations are still struggling with that whole, whatever you want to call buy-in, right? How really beneficial, and how much does, ROI get affected? How does, customer retention and growth get affected? I mean, you're living it for real. If you could kind of give people a little bit of lens into, the true impact of what we're talking about?
It's a good question. I actually think that with all the craziness of this year and the impact of COVID, human-centered design and really designing for our employees and our customers is going to be something that more companies are willing to invest in because they start to see how much change they can actually do. There's many companies that have sent so many of their employees to work from home. Certainly Ericsson, I want to say out of our 100,000 plus employees, more than 85,000 of us around the world are working from home. And it's just that incredible belief of, look what we're capable of, how much we can change the experience for the better for our employees and customers. And I think that as companies start to realize, oh, I can serve our customers in different ways, but I really need to have a deep understanding of what they need. And I need to help my people who show up for customers every day. I need to help them be empowered to support those needs. I think that will only cause things like customer and employee experience to grow in the coming years.
As you're saying that, I start thinking about my wife who works for a global organization as well. And she, will share with me as far as the difference in her day from when she was in the office versus now being remote, and how much the organization as a whole is, really giving them additional educational opportunities in regards to diversity, client connection, emotional intelligence, all of these things that we know will help us to impact and affect well-being and retention and performance. And she talks about how quite overwhelming it is. She's like, I've had 5 things today that I'm supposed to attend about all of these particular topics, and I'm not even able to serve clients. So how are you trying to balance that at Ericsson?
It's an interesting question because I think we all struggle when we move to work from home. Those of us who had that opportunity, we struggle with how do we actually find boundaries in our time, and how do we make time for ourselves, for our family, and for our work. And it's not about balance, I think, it's much more about how do we make the right space we need. And that's true when it comes to learning and development, is that you need to make space for that. And it's the thing that lands to the bottom of the list. My dear friend, who is the Chief Learning Officer here at Ericsson, Vidya, is incredibly passionate about this topic. And she talks about how much you give yourself, and when you're a leader, how much you give your team when you make time to learn. But you also have to, if all you're doing is learning, I would agree with you. You don't have enough time to apply what you're learning and really make sure that it sinks in for you. And so I think that it is a balance on any given day. It's just not the same on any given day.
I think that's a great point. So you are working across what many people will say multiple silos.
Mm-hmm.
The internal organization from a HR and all that. You have the external from a sales perspective, and then also from an experience perspective. So I think for me, wearing those 3 hats is pretty impactful when you start talking about coming from that customer service base and how now the customer has permeated through you, as well as others who are making that same elevation up to higher levels of the organization. I think that's an important, component to talk about. So I think the whole transformation and change piece is what so many organizations struggle with. It's the execution. It's like, okay, we have these great ideas and plans. How do we execute? What have you found has made a significant difference for you with that, working across all of those different parts of the organization? And I don't even know how you address the whole mass issue, 100,000 plus employees. But what is something that really stands out for you?
I don't know if you happen to be familiar with the ProSci methodology for change. I'm a huge fan of the AdCar model. And I remember that it felt like a light bulb the first time I was introduced to it, which I also would not like to mention how many years ago that was. But I remember thinking, oh my gosh, usually by the time I'm tackling something, I'm square in the middle of knowledge. I'm passionate about what opportunity we have to solve and make things better for our people and our customers and our business. And I really realized I had to be thoughtful about understanding whether people were at awareness or desire stages and how to bring them along for the journey. So I often joke and say, probably early in my career, I would have said, okay, you've given me an assignment. I'm on this side of the mountain. I need to get to that side of the mountain. And the fastest, best way to do it is a tunnel straight through. Let's do that. And then I would want everybody to go with me. And I would be so surprised. Why are people standing around going, no, I don't, maybe I'm afraid of tight spaces. Maybe it's too dark, but I don't agree. We need to get to the other side of the mountain. And oh, all right. Well, if we have to go up the mountain, down the mountain and circle it 15 times, that's exactly what we're going to do. If it means that everybody moves from this side of the mountain to that side of the mountain together. And it was really reminding myself that that's what we have to do every time we ask people to change. And when they offer objections and saying, well, no, I don't want to do that, or I don't feel comfortable with that, they're giving you a gift, the gift of feedback that says, hey, I'm not comfortable with this. Find out why I'm not comfortable. Because when you do, your plan to improve things will get better and people will want to go along with you for the ride. That's true of customer experience so much because we have all this responsibility to make things better, but no authority to make it so. The only authority we get is what people give us. So we have to persuade people, join me on this journey to the other side of the mountain. And that is what I think probably keeps me coming back for more to do this job. This chance to do that with people all across the business and all across the world.
So it's that learning that patience, yet being persistent. That's what I'm hearing.
Oh, patience and persistence, without a doubt.
Okay, so you talked about, having the employee engagement element. And when we start talking about, igniting the CX celebration and carrying that forth, all year, for us, we look at initially that whole customer service week celebration and appreciating the people that are delivering. Does Ericsson, or how does Ericsson actually do celebration, during that time? And then how are you carrying that forth all year long?
I'm not altogether certain I could say whether we celebrate customer service week. I think that because of the way we think about our people, we tend to celebrate them throughout the year. And so it's less about it's this one day or this one week. It's much more about how do we celebrate how they show up for our customers and how they give back and how they show up for one another. There's some incredible stories out there of our field service personnel and the work that they've gone through this year to stay safe, but to make sure that they show up and go out in the middle of the pandemic all over the world to make sure our customers get what they need. And we've celebrated so many of those stories this year and recognized our people. When you're having to go into the office in order to be able to take care of customers, we know that puts you more at risk. And it's that ability to share their stories and recognize what they do. They should get to hear it year round. So that's more of the Ericsson philosophy.
Well, you bring up something that I think is also really important when you also look at where we are today and where things are going to be and the opportunities that exist for us from a global perspective. Is, you and I kind of chatted a little bit about, cultures, talking about the whole pandemic thing and how it spreads and doesn't spread, and some of the things that we can do in certain societies versus others. I think my perspective, not being as well versed in the whole global and therefore localization impacts and effects, is, we have to be very mindful of certain things as we go around the globe. When you start thinking about customer engagement, employee engagement, commitment, persistence and patience, all of those things. So if you can kind of give us a lens into that global effect and impact and how it drives your decision making.
Well, our customers are all over the world. And that means that we need to be where they are. And that's where our employees are. And to me, it is when you're in a global role like mine, I can't be everywhere, but they can. And so a big part of what's important for me is being able to understand what is their perspective. They, particularly for those teams in, sales and customer support and project delivery who see our customers all the time, their voice matters just as much as our customer voice. And so when we do customer experience work, much like we did this year, we actually were very thoughtful and measured about the fact that not only did we need customer voice in the work we were doing for journey mapping, but we needed the employee voice to tell us, what do you learn? What do you hear from our customers? Because those two lenses of perspectives really build out a better picture for us to make sure we work on the right things and that we're making progress when we do work on improving those things. So I'm pretty passionate about, you have to listen to your employees too, because they really do carry that culture and that understanding to you and say, well, this doesn't work quite that way here. Let's make it so that it works better. I think that makes the list of things to improve pretty long. But then their voice helps prioritize what we need to do first.
Well, what you explained right there to me is kind of like the core elements associated with that human-centered design. It's not, you're not looking and saying, internal customer, external customer. I mean, you are in order from a management, to be able to deploy and execute perspective, but you're still ultimately looking at human-centered design. So if you talked about the AdCar impact and how the change and transformation process, for you has been easier, by following that method and methodology. Is there something that you're following that you're focusing in on that's kind of driving your thinking and your decision making when you start thinking about human-centered design?
Not any one particular discipline, because I think that's one of the benefits of having been in the field so long, is you get to do everything from, having had the opportunity to train in design thinking at the Stanford D School to having spent time learning service design and applying it. There's just all these incredible elements that you bring to the table. And so I think it's more about bring the right tool out of the toolbox, depending on what you need to do. And it's also a case of hiring really smart, talented people that come from different disciplines and backgrounds around the world, because they bring their knowledge and skills into play. And it's far less about what do I know and far much what do we know and how do we help people. And as I've done a lot of interviewing to hire for my leadership team this year, and I always love it when I'm down to 2 or 3 people and I sit to myself and I go, I'm not sure I know which person I'm going to hire. I have so many great people. That to me means that not only is there a passion for people who want to work in our field, but the harder the decision is for me, the happier I am, because it means we'll have an amazing team who bring all of those incredible skills to the table. And it's things that really make collaborating much more interesting and exciting in the end.
So when as you're talking, I start thinking about, the shifts and the changes that we've gone through. And there can be, there's something that's referred to in the book by Chip and Dan Heath called the curse of knowledge. They kind of, made it a little bit more popular than it had been in the past, and it continues to build. But basically, we have to be very careful because we get biases that get created because of our past experiences. And so when you think about employee experience and customer experience, there's a lot of things that we think because of that and information that's been shared, but COVID's kind of shifted and made everything so different. And so how are you, or what's one thing that stands out to you that it's like, hey, this used to be true and I believed in this, but because of all of this shift now, not so much. It's not something I should be doing.
Oh gosh, you're going to make me into a customer experience heretic if I do this, but gosh, I will say this. I think there's a mad passion for metrics in our world. And then that really is taken center stage in customer experience. And I've never seen so many passionate arguments about what's better, NPS, customer sat, indexes, effort score. And if I think back on my career, I was like, if I could get back all the hours I spent arguing about what works best, how to set a goal, whether we should add money to those things, what type of incentives work, to, what scale we should use. I think that I'm like, what would I have done with all that time? Because I think metrics are great. Maybe I'm a bit more fan now these days of objectives and key results, since it's more centered around moments that matter, those objectives to customers. But that's probably what I think is like, what could you do without? Well, you could do without the metrics. You could do much more if you focused on the only questions I need to ask you are, how do I better understand what doesn't work well for you and why? And what does work well for you and why? And then how do I measure whether we've actually improved or not? Not by a number and a metric, but instead asking about how well did we do in improving this thing we were working on, whether that's improving accessibility of the knowledge base, or whether that's improving how well our customer support people are able to help you. There's so many incredible ways we can make things better that if we spent less time arguing about metrics and more time arguing about, we got to work on this thing now, and what's the best way to solve this problem, that we'd make so much more progress.
Okay, so what I hear you saying is that as you've matured and you've gained more perspectives and all of that, is that your level of weighting has moved from the quantitative analysis to the qualitative analysis. Would that be a true statement?
Some of that. I think you still need quantitative, but you don't have to ask, how satisfied are you, or how likely are you to recommend? You can instead say things like, probably one of my favorite stories is, if you want to improve your knowledge base and you want to reduce calls in the contact center, you often hear people say, well, let's do a knowledge base project and let's go make that better and let's do more training for our people. And I say, how about you get rid of your survey after contact, all of it, and then just put one question back in place, new survey. And it says, did you try to resolve this issue yourself before you contacted us? Yes or no? You have all the other data. You know what they called you about, what they emailed you about, what they chatted with you about. You could take all that case data and go, everybody who said yes, okay, that's our opportunity. Let's set aside no, let's look at yes. And then look at those cases and go, which of these should they have been able to solve themselves? Those are the first knowledge base entries you should go and improve. Go improve those. Go see how much more call avoidance you get because you've satisfied customers who want to solve it themselves, given them a better path to solve it themselves, and you've reduced your call volume. One question, and the fewer yeses you get tells you how successful you are. That's not a how satisfied are you. I didn't even need to have you call me because you didn't want to. And that's how I think about, if you're asking for quantitative feedback, make it super useful and go do something with it.
Well, I think that kind of comes back to what we had talked about before in regards to the whole execution piece. So some people will say how, especially some of the experts will say how when they talk to certain organizations, they are referring to cases or problems or issue resolution, things that continue to fester. I mean, it's like, hey, we've been hearing the same thing for 2 years, and they're like, well, why don't you fix it? I mean, to me, I think you just made the whole process a little bit more agile so that you can just fix it.
Mm-hmm. And then stop asking that question, ask a new question, because that's the next problem you're going to go tackle. So I love both qualitative and quantitative research, but it should be purposeful and it should be used.
Okay, so then I have to ask this question because I see this often, especially in a contact center survey, is you get a measurement, that transactional measurement, and they'll ask the question about the service that has been delivered by the representative or the contact center agent. And that's all they ask. Tell us about how, they listen, tell us about their professionalism, tell us about how, effective they were or efficient they were, whatever the case may be. And it's just about the agent. I mean, to me, I have certain opinions and issues about that. And I think you've kind of addressed them when you start talking about the whole, process and qualitative process piece. But what are your insights and thoughts on that type of measurement?
Well, it probably starts with the ultimate philosophy of any question you ask, you should be doing something with that data. So if you're going to be asking only about the agent, or even anything you ask about the agent, then what are you doing about it? And you had mentioned Chip and Dan Heath. One of the things that I've heard Chip talk about is bright spot analysis. The ability to identify people who have the same set of circumstances around them, but somehow seem to do things better, perform better, or somehow more successful or well accomplished in the same environment. This is true of agents. And so it's not just looking at the people who maybe get rated that one time not very well, or how about looking at all of the agents' performance and saying, how come these people consistently do really well? What do we learn from what they do? So we can actually transfer some of those capabilities and those ways of working to other people. Because I think for most agents, it feels like punishment if they get a bad score. And, I think if you turn it around and you think about it from a more positive experience, you get a lot of opportunity to improve as well. But it still goes back to that same philosophy. Do something with the data or don't ask the question.
I think when, you're in an easy position to answer that, right? I mean, because it's like, I have this triple role now, and I'm across multiple, silos or departments, of the organization. Human-centered design is important for us, and we've been doing it for a long time. Heck, that's why they wanted me, right? I mean, you and I have had these conversations about why you are where you are now. Oh, and by the way, you moved from the US and you're now just outside of Stockholm, Sweden, which, that we could talk about that forever too. But, I think for me, it's kind of easy with your experience and your maturation and the commitment to the organization. However, if I'm a person, regardless of the level, so I'm a frontline leader, heck, I'm a frontline individual contributor, or, maybe I'm a senior manager or director or VP, but I still haven't cracked, the silos and moved across and gotten to the points where we're looking at human-centered design, customer centricity and executing. I mean, so what is a piece of advice you'd give to somebody who's kind of in that role? They have the passion, but they're kind of frustrated.
I have walked many miles in their shoes. And, you might say that, having the opportunity to be in a leadership position today, that somehow makes my job easier. It really doesn't. In the end, my job is to really listen, learn, and act. And listening doesn't mean just to our customers. It means to my peers and my key stakeholders all across the business. And if they're not bought in that we need to work on the right things and how we work together, then there's something I'm missing. And I really feel like if I think about that persuasion skill, it has to be rooted in what did I listen and learn from them. If they think we aren't working on the right thing, I better understand that, because I can't really build a coalition of the willing to work together to make improvements without that. And that's, I think of it as if you're in a CX role, doesn't matter how senior you are, your job is to be that glue that holds those silos together and connect people all across the business. And the better you are at doing that, at listen, learn, act, the more trust you build, and the more likely the next time you go to them, they're even more willing to listen now, because you've done something together for them to be successful. And share the credit. They're going to put in a lot of the hard work to make things better. That's the fun part about celebrating, that we celebrate and win together when we do this work. And I can see why it's frustrating. I've been there. And some people really don't want to play. So if that's where you're at, work with the ones who do. And when you build a reputation that you can do this work together, it'll start to persuade other people that maybe they want to be part of that journey with you.
Okay, so then I have to think about going about that. You talked about execution and, there's talking about passion, patience and persistence, all of those things. How, if I am in that particular role, and to me, you're telling me that I have to be proactive, I have to be assertive, I have to be bold. I mean, all those things have to happen in order for me to now start building, this network and this community of people that share similar passions? What would you suggest that somebody do?
Part of it is, you probably spent much time in this skill, is that active listening skill. Get really good at that. Be able to make sure that you can reflect back to people. Did I understand you correctly? Am I, what clarity can I get here to make sure I crystal understand what your needs are and what your objections are to what topic I brought to the table? I'll tell you that every time I start a new role, I spend my first 100 days listening to as many people as I can across the business. I'll go talk to teams. I'll go talk to individuals. I'll talk to them at all levels of the company. And part of what I'm looking for is not just what is our customer experience today and what do you think needs to be improved, but even what do you think my role or my team's role should be in this? What do you think the priority is? If you don't think the customer's a priority at all, tell me more about that. Because it's how I learn, and I could come back later and go, I have a really good picture of who's, to borrow an NPS scenario, who's a promoter of our customers and of improving our customer experience, who's neutral. And, we could probably move them to promoter if we worked on these things or we did these things, and who are detractors and why is it such a pain point for them not to do this type of work? Then I could build an actual engagement strategy that says, how do I really bring more people up to that promoter status and really think about that? So active listening is definitely one of them. Be a really good communicator. And I cannot tell you how valuable storytelling classes are, because the better you can tell the story, the more people go, oh yeah, no, I get that. And I want to be a part of that. And if they can hear in that story, wait, that was my feedback, I cared about that, then you've done a great job, because they feel heard. And then they want to be more a part of where you're going.
Okay, so now let's talk about the forward look. We've had a lot of these transitions. You and I have talked about them. We talked about the globalization, the localization. I would dare to suspect also, because of, the agility focus and all of that you've got your eyes set on something. It's like, okay, because of where we are now and where we're going and where we want to be, I think this is something that's important. Can you share with us what that is?
You mean in my current role today? So one of the things that I love about Ericsson and our people is how customer-centric they are. That's an incredible gift to someone in my job. I don't have to convince them that our customers are valuable or that their needs are important or even that they exist. It really is a gift. And so, to me, one of the things that we're working on right now is building what is the North Star for our customer experience. What do we want it to become? And then how do we chart our path to get there? And that to me is the gift, to be able to work with our leaders across the business and building that out, work with our customers and building that out, work with our employees across the business and building that picture is probably one of the most exciting things that I get to do in my career, is that type of vision building. And then what's our strategy and our roadmap for delivering on that? That to me is just so exciting. And I know that's maybe very CX geeky, but that's what I love, because you get to connect to so many people and bring their perspectives together and paint a vision that says, yeah, I want that. Let's go do that. And then, okay, how do we get there? And so that's what I'm looking forward to, is how do we get there?
You're feeding your passion. I think that's awesome. Okay, so I had an incredible fun time with you today. Can you please share with Igniters how they can connect with you?
Absolutely. So I'm pretty easy to find on LinkedIn, just Tabitha Dunn. And that's probably the easiest and fastest way to find me. And for anyone who wants to follow up and ask questions, I'm always happy to answer via LinkedIn.
Tabitha Dunn, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom and helping us all to ignite that CX celebration all year long.
Thank you for listening to the Customer Service Weekly podcast. Please rate, review, subscribe, follow, and share the Customer Service Weekly podcast and register for a free membership at customerserviceweekly.org to get the latest updates on how you can help ignite the CX spirit everywhere.